Welcome to the Candice Malcolm Show. My name is Kris Sims. I'm the Alberta Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. And when I say we have a special show for you, boy, do I mean it. We're going to get right into the gun issue here in Canada. And I'm not talking about the gangbangers on the streets of Toronto who are causing mayhem, ruining lives with illegal handguns. I am talking about the federal government's confiscation of private property from legal, law-abiding firearms owners. We're going to be speaking with an expert on this. We're also going to be speaking with the Toronto Police Association, who is rightly speaking up and saying, hey, we do have a gun problem on the streets of Toronto, but it's not the duck hunters in Manitoba who are the problem. It's not the sports shooters in London, Ontario, who are trying to go out to the range, who are causing the problem. It's the criminals who are committing the crime here. The reason why we need to dive into this now is because it seems like the federal Liberal government is deciding to go ahead now with its confiscation rollout of lawfully obtained firearms. What that means is if you had legally obtained a certain kind of firearm, okay, before May of 2020, unless you surrender that firearm over to the state somehow, you will instantly become a criminal. So the language we're now hearing from Ottawa goes something like this. Yeah, we know we've been kicking this around for the past 5 years. Yeah, we know that we've actually ruined several normal gun businesses. And yeah, we think that now that we're going to be dangling some form of monetary compensation at cost to taxpayers, by the way, we're actually going to have more people happy about this, happy to surrender their private property to the government. Now, this is the thing. I'm a firearms owner, okay? It's easy to say, "Oh, well, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to comply." That's not who people are within the law-abiding firearms community. Folks who are legally owning guns in Canada are usually big sticklers for rules. That's because we have to go through major screening when we want to legally own a firearm in Canada. Even if you just want to have a regular rifle or a shotgun in Canada, like, more than 2.5 million-ish people do in Canada. If you want to go do that, you have to get a firearms license. And there, they do big background checks. They phone all of your ex-boyfriends and girlfriends. You have to have an instructor sign off on everything you do. There's storage rules, there's transportation rules, there's all sorts of stuff that goes along with being a legal, law-abiding firearms owner. So yeah, unless you comply with the government, you're going to be instantly a criminal. What an unfair situation for so many firearms owners in Canada. Now, when we're talking about the cost to taxpayers, this is already going to cost over $1 billion with a B. We do not have the money for this. Just picture it. Picture not just the compensation amounts that they're going to try to be offering to people eventually. Picture the man hours, the people hours, as Prime Minister Justin Trudeau would probably call it, of the law enforcement that is going to be required to what? Go door to door? Say, now it's time to surrender your firearms? Or even somebody who's carefully approaching the police station saying, I think I need to do this now. It's in my car. There's hours and hours and hours of paperwork, right? So this is going to cause a big, messy problem. And we wanted to highlight it on this special show. So this is the Candice Malcolm Show. It's on Juno News. You aren't going to hear this level of expertise in detail on the mainstream media. And I'll tell you why. One, it's just sometimes that they don't know. They see a movie like Rambo and they hear some politicians say assault style weapons. And they picture some full auto machine gun, some person spraying bullets by holding their trigger finger down. Those guns are not legal in Canada. They have not been legal in Canada since the 1970s, okay? So there's a lot of bad information coming out of the mainstream media on this, a lot of ignorance, a lot of water carrying that is happening right now for the Liberal government. That is why it's super important for people to subscribe, okay? Go to Juno News, subscribe to this show, okay? Tell your friends, especially if you're within the legal firearms community and you're at the range, tell them about this show. Share this show online. Okay, I wanted to play you a clip which perfectly illustrates the situation we're in. I'm laughing because otherwise I'll cry. Okay, I'm going to set this up. The person who's asking the question is Andrew Lawton. You might remember him from such shows as right here, at least the previous incarnation of this show. Andrew Lawton had his own show on True North for years and years. He is now an elected member of parliament, and he stood up in the House of Commons back when it was sitting, for like 73 minutes after the election, and he asked the public safety minister about the legal, law-abiding right to own a firearm in Canada, and he kind of quizzed him, and he kind of failed. So let's listen.
Does the minister know what an RPAL is?
No, Minister.
I do not.
Member.
Does the minister know what the CFSC is?
No, Minister.
I do not, no.
Member.
I'll stipulate, Chair, that is the Canadian firearm safety course that all gun owners in Canada have to do to get their firearms license. Has the minister ever done the Canadian firearm safety course?
The Honourable Minister.
Speaker, it's my third week on the job. No, I have not.
The Honourable Member.
Does the minister know what safety classes and safety demands are expected of law-abiding Canadian gun owners?
The Honourable Minister.
This is not about law-abiding gun owners, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member.
How can the minister make that claim when he doesn't know the basic fundamentals of law-abiding gun ownership in this country, Chair?
Did you hear what the minister said there at the very end? That is the most important part. Now, it would be nice if the public safety minister, who is going to be the person in charge of confiscating people's firearms, would know what an RPAL is. So that's a restricted license. Okay, that's if you're able to own a handgun, not a shotgun or a rifle. That's what an RPAL is. It would be nice if he actually even had such a license. But the very basis of him saying this is not about legal gun owners in Canada, yeah, it is. That's why we're having this conversation. If the federal government were trying to crack down on criminals and gangbangers who are using gun, like this conversation would be over. This show wouldn't exist. None of these advocacy organizations, including the Taxpayers Federation, including the CCFR, would be upset about this at all. It would be, okay, fine, you go do your government thing and make people safe. But that isn't what is happening here. What is happening here is something that the mainstream media is trying to euphemistically call a buyback program. That's incorrect, just on its face, just verbally, okay, using words, because the firearms owners in question did not purchase their firearms from the government. They legally acquired their firearms from lawful firearms sellers, usually a private company. Of some now have gone bankrupt due to this confiscation. And that's exactly what this is. This is a confiscation program, and it is a confiscation program that we do not have the money for. I'll give you a perfect example to explain why we don't have the money for this and why the Taxpayers Federation is fighting this. Folks might remember something called the Long Gun Registry, okay, way back in the mists of time when then Liberal Prime Minister Jean Chrétien was around, okay? Remember when they had a balanced budget? That was magical. Okay, so they had a long gun registry, and they wanted literally like duck hunters, okay, and ranchers, because ranchers need to keep long guns on their property to take care of pests and stuff and threats to their livestock. They had a long gun registry where you would have to register your long gun with the government. They estimated it was going to cost taxpayers around $2 million with an M. By the time the smoke cleared, it cost us around $2 billion. So times 1,000. So this is a huge problem. It is a problem of cost, and it's a problem of private property. How are people trying to push back on this? How are people trying to convince Prime Minister Mark Carney, who says he's a pragmatist, to look at the numbers, look at the spreadsheet, and walk away from this? Because ultimately, this is the previous guy's mess. Mark Carney, in good conscience, can say, you know what, guys? This doesn't make sense. We don't have the money for this. My administration as Prime Minister is not going ahead with this. We're dropping it. We're going to focus on actually making the streets safer and not blowing money going after law-abiding people. Who's in this fight? How can we convince the government to do the right thing? Let's find out. Joining me now is Rod Giltaca. He is the CEO and Executive Director for the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights. You've probably seen their stickers on the backs of pickup trucks. I know it is super popular around southern Alberta here where I live in Lethbridge. They are a major advocacy organization for the legal ownership of firearms in Canada. If you have not checked them out yet, I strongly encourage you to do so. After this chat, I bet you just can't resist after listening to Rod. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Kris.
So, and I meant that. I've been listening to some of your earlier podcast appearances, and you're very passionate, very knowledgeable when it comes to the rights of firearms owners here in Canada. Last I was looking, there was around 2.5 million of us here in Canada. Are those the latest numbers you have too?
Yeah, somewhere around there, just slightly under 2.5 million for all licenses, both restricted and non-restricted.
So what he means, and I'm going to keep on translating for folks who aren't gun owners. I am a firearms owner in Canada. I was raised on hunted meat. I see them as a tool, the same as one would have, say, a snowblower or a chainsaw or a pickup truck. You have to use them responsibly, but I think that they're an essential element of Canadian culture, frankly, especially Western Canadian culture. Now, when we're getting into what's happening here, this is not going to affect all firearms owners. It is going to affect firearms owners who own specific kinds of guns. And I wanted to reiterate, a lot of folks in the media keep calling this thing a buyback. It is not a buyback. I did not purchase my gun from the government. This is a confiscation of private property, which was legally obtained. And now they've changed the rules. Do we have an estimation as to how many people, how many gun owners this is affecting, this rolling confiscation that it sounds like the federal government wants to go ahead with?
Well, it's funny. The federal government says this affects somewhere around 140,000 firearms, which is absolutely ridiculous. Nobody believes that for a second. There are somewhere around 90,000 AR-15s. AR-15s are registered. They're restricted firearms. So the government knows who has them and how many there are. And so for them to say, after all of these successive bans and all of the bans via variant status from the RCMP, that somehow the total number of affected firearms is 140,000 is ridiculous. It's probably, nobody knows for sure, because the overwhelming majority of these firearms are unregistered. The government doesn't know who has them or where they are or how many there are. But we think there should be somewhere maybe between 500,000, 800,000, maybe up to over 1 million. So it's a lot of guns.
Based on my experience and the family I have, that feels about right. Right? If
Yeah.
you start thinking about who among my family has certain kinds of firearms legally obtained, and then you kind of work out the ratio, that feels about right. Now, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, we're right there with you. So we are fighting against this gun confiscation. Last we checked, this current push to confiscate people's private property is going to cost taxpayers more than $1 billion. That's with a B. And for folks who are saying, oh, well, their government's going to come in under budget, that's never happened. And I can point back to, of course, the long gun registry that they tried to do. Back then, they said it was going to cost around 2 million with an M. After the smoke all cleared, they were getting close to 2 billion with a B by the time they were done. And it didn't make Canadians safer. We are going to get into the whole safety issue. We've got actually a spokesperson for the Toronto Police Association, so somebody who's in connection with the boys and girls in blue right on the front line. So we're going to get into the element that this doesn't make Canadians safer. What I wanted to focus in on with you, Rod, is how undemocratic and really unfair this is to have your lawfully purchased private property seized by the state at great expense to you. Keep in mind, the government doesn't have a magical money pot. They're blowing taxpayers' money to do this, to set up these registries, to set up all the administration, to try to get the police, who are already strapped for time and people, to try to go pick up these firearms. And there's also the element of sellers. Do you guys get into that at all? I personally interviewed a gun seller, wonderful lady, mom of like 5 kids up in Prince George. She had to shut down her business because she had so many stranded assets sitting on the shelf. Are you guys in contact with the actual retailers too?
We are. We have a business member program, and so we are in touch with a lot of people, and we have longstanding relationships in the retail space as well. But yeah, they've had to hold on to all of this property that was banned by via OIC, Order in Council, by fiat, basically, for over half a decade. Now, some people probably were sitting on $100,000 worth of inventory. Many businesses use a line of credit to fund their inventory. So you can only imagine the situation that some of these retailers were in. And just going back to something you said about the long gun registry costing $2 billion instead of $2 million, that's only 1,000 times over. So that's actually a pretty reasonable budget underestimate for the government. But I think one of the most important things for people to remember is this won't cost 750 million like the highest estimate the government thought. It'll probably cost $2 to $8 billion. And the situation we're in now, that's borrowed money. So it will be borrowing $2 to $8 billion at interest. And again, not to step too much into your topic, but I think people forget right now, Canada is paying $4 billion a month just in interest on the national debt. That's before anything. That's before policing. That's before employment insurance. That's before pension. That's nothing. That's $4 billion a month. So this is just going to add to that, which is even more of a slap in the face to hardworking Canadians.
Man after my own heart. Preach,
crazy.
brother. Yeah. To put it this way, okay, what he just said is exactly true. Okay, the interest just on the federal debt, we're not counting the provincial debts, just the federal government's debt is $1 billion a week. So picture everybody gathering around on a Saturday night, and instead of watching hockey, we burn down a hospital. Build it up brand new. Wait, don't send anybody in yet. Burn it down instead. That's how much we are spending on the interest on the debt. So exactly to your point, Rod, the federal government is now thinking that we're going to borrow more money to go out and confiscate and compensate these law-abiding firearms owners. Now, I know a lot of the viewers of the Candice Malcolm Show will have their PAL, okay? They will have firearms licenses. But if you can speak to their brother-in-law and their sisters and people who perhaps aren't in what I would call the gun world, the law-abiding gun world, can you explain to them why this is important? Why should non-firearms owners, of which there are many in Canada, care about the fact that tons of people are getting their property seized by the government?
It's not so much that they have to care about it. They have to transfer the same set of values that they do for everything else in our society over to people that lawfully own firearms. So in Canada, there's a very strict system that is in place to regulate legal firearms. You need a license. You need to prove competency by taking a course. You need to have extensive background checks. You get a background check every 24 hours. Handguns are registered, so the government knows where they are, where they're being stored. You can only shoot them at an approved shooting range. You can't shoot them out in the bush. Same thing with some long guns like AR-15s. All this stuff is very, very tightly regulated. And I think what a lot of people miss is private firearm ownership is a feature of free societies where you are not a slave, you are a citizen. You are entrusted with a variety of responsibilities, just like you are entrusted with a driver's license. We do not ban cars. I don't like, there's so many analogies floating around all the time, right? I've heard them all and I've heard them ad nauseum. So it's, but we'll just use this one for now. I guess I'm talking to myself to not get annoyed with them, but everyone is entrusted with a driver's license and there's no criminal background check required. But yet the odd person drives drunk, wipes an entire family out, and that's real. But the first reaction of the government or the public isn't like, obviously people shouldn't own cars or they should only go to and from specific places with permission of the government. Of course not. They're like, these people broke the rules, throw them in jail, give them a lifetime driving ban. When there was a van attack in Toronto and If the van attack was a multiple victim public shooting, of which we've had very few in Canadian history,
Thank God. Yeah.
you would think that that people would be up in arms. Like, why can you take $80 down to the van rental place with just a driver's license and drive away with a van? Nobody said that ever. It never even crossed anyone's mind to increase the restrictions on renting vans. But for some reason, it's guns. And the reason for that is not everyone sees value in firearms. So if I were to forward one important message, firearms are incredibly important to the people that own them. You can have firearms in Canada for hunting, sport shooting, collecting. You can pass them down. There are a variety of different things. And Canadian gun culture is a beneficial, super positive culture. So people sport shoot with these guns. Hunting is a way of life. And then people are like, well, it's a hobby, and it's not. And I'll tell you why. Because these are not, if you think of a golf club as a hobby, but at the worst moment in your life, when no one's there to help you, this tool, this sport shooting or hunting tool, can save your life. So this makes them extremely, extremely valuable property people. So we are qualified to own them. We are tightly regulated, right? All the people get criminal record checks every day. We have storage requirements. These are laws. We have transportation requirements. And licensed gun owners do not represent a disproportionate risk to public safety. And then the other side, sorry for going on, but this is important, and it takes more than a couple of sound bites to explain it. When you're talking about bans or further restrictions or buybacks, as it were, confiscation programs, you're not just taking guns from people that didn't do anything to deserve it. You're destroying the shooting clubs. You're running up the national debt. You're destroying a culture that is older than Canada itself, and that represents billions in real estate and billions in property improvements, and taking away the central hub, the community hub, in a community that's at least 2.5 million people strong. So there are many moving parts. It's not a simple situation, and it is devastating to the people that, again, haven't done anything to deserve it. It's bad policy.
Amen. I have a few more questions I want to get into here, and some of them are kind of specific. So bear with me, audience. Can you explain, in the best of your ability, what kinds of firearms the current federal Liberal government is trying to ban? Because I want to stress, this may sound silly for those of us who understand firearms culture, so folks, just bear with me. In Canada, the machine gun that you will see on like a Rambo movie or something, where the person just holds down the trigger and sprays bullets, those have been big time illegal since before I was born. Okay, in the early 70s. So the full auto thing, like that is not accepted in Canada. Those are not what the government is banning. When people say, oh, they're banning semi-automatics, okay, what a semi-automatic means in normal people talk is if you've got your firearm up, it's squeeze, bang, squeeze, bang. You have to pull the trigger every time. There's no holding your finger down and spraying rounds at people. So like, this is where I do think there's a big education gap between the folks who understand normal, safe, law-abiding firearms ownerships with all of our trigger locks and our gun safes and all of our background checks, okay? When you go even just for your regular PAL, okay? Your regular, non-restricted, if you want to own a rifle or a shotgun, they phone your ex-boyfriends and girlfriends, okay? Like, they do a really thorough background check to make sure things are all on the up and up. So all that said, can you please describe for people what kinds and styles, I think is the better term, of firearms the federal government is trying to confiscate?
So the most important thing is assault weapons don't exist in Canada. The only people that
Exactly.
have assault weapons, as you're describing, full autos, right? Hold the trigger and the firearm continues to discharge bullets, right? Those it was actually the late 70s that those were
Oh, late.
banned.
Sorry.
And yeah, it was a long time ago. We definitely agree on that. And the only people that have those are movie armorers and museums, basically, and the police and the military, of course. And then a handful of people that had specific status. Like even me, I'm too young to have gotten a prohib license, a prohibited firearms license. So really important. I I I have so much experience with the legacy media in Canada, showing stories about the so-called buyback and the Bill C-71 and Bill C-21 and all this different legislation and orders in council. And then while they're talking about these measures, they show full autos in the United States being discharged. Like, when you say education gap, it truly is propaganda. And of course, it's wildly frustrating. So these guns that are being banned are a wide variety of guns. So you have regular semi-autos that look like machine guns, but just aren't. And these are guns that have been tested by the RCMP to make sure that they couldn't be easily converted to full autos. Okay, these are tried and true guns that we've had for decades upon decades in Canada. Then hunting rifles and target shooting rifles that are too powerful. So they say over 10,000 joules, but basically you look and they're like, big game African hunting rifles. So there's a wide variety of different firearms that fall under their assault style, ban. And some of them are even single shot rifles. Many bolt actions. There are even some shotguns are too dangerous to own. So they continue to call them assault weapons. And they tried to call them assault style weapons. Like, anyway, I don't know if a lot of people bought into that, but there are no assault weapons in Canada. So these are firearms that are held by people like me that I use for target shooting or training or recreational shooting or what have you. And it is an absolute mess, and it's government overreach in the extreme.
Some of it, I'm glad you described it with the mainstream media. That's why I belabored the point of like, this is not, I love me a Stallone flick, but this is not a Stallone flick that's happening here in Canada, not from law-abiding firearms owners anyway. I wanted to get into exactly what you guys are fighting and what you guys are proposing, because you mentioned the old, I would say, more restricted firearms licenses. In some cases, way back in the day, again, before I was born, thank you, there were some of those firearms that were then grandfathered in. Okay. Is that what your organization is looking at with some of these versions of the firearms, which are mostly cosmetic? I will point out, like they're banning ones that have like the removable, stock, so you can shorten it, which a lot of women use, by the way, because it makes it easier for shorter arms, right? They're taking away the guns that are painted black, okay, but the wood grain version is okay. Like, a lot of this is cosmetic. So what is the CCFR doing as far as negotiating with the federal government? Are you guys looking at like a grandfathering in to try to get the government to back off on this?
Well, the government is marching forward with their buyback, and we have information that they are. And we released a video, I don't know, about a week and a half ago. And basically, where the situation that gun owners are in is, we've been fighting this since May 1st, 2020. We sued the government in the largest lawsuit in the history of Canada on behalf of gun owners. We took the government to federal court. We cross-examined every witness. We fought every intervener. We filed 3 injunctions. We went toe-to-toe and put $3 million into that. That's never been possible for gun owners before. So that's great. We lost. We went to the Court of Appeal. We fought them again. We lost again, and we are still fighting it because we've made an application to go to the Supreme Court of Canada. So we'll see whether or not that's accepted. So we're continuing to fight this to have it completely repealed. But I don't know. I don't want to be too cynical. The courts are a funny bunch. Let's just put it that way. We also participated at an unprecedented level in the last election. The last election was for everything.
Yeah.
If the conservatives would have won, all of this would have been being unwound as we speak. So unfortunately, the CCFR stood alone, but we were actually the 5th largest third-party advertiser in the entire country, including unions and all the rest of that stuff. So we took a real swing at them during the election. Now they're moving forward with their buyback because they won again. I wish more people had jumped in, not to be too self-serving, but more people had jumped in during the election. Maybe we wouldn't be having this conversation. But as a last-ditch effort to total confiscation over the span of 1 year, we said, hey, government, there's an opportunity for you not to spend all this money, for you to leave all the good people alone, right? Maybe divert that money into dealing with firearm-related violence, which has never been higher, by issuing grandfathering. Now, grandfathering means that gun owners that have these types of firearms can continue to own them. No new ones can come into the country, and that we could buy and sell between us. So we could move these firearms around with people who have the same license status. So that would cost the government nothing. Taxpayers would save an unimaginable amount of money. Gun owners could be not victimized, at least at the extent that they would with immediate confiscation, which is what the government is rolling out. And then it's also, to us, the most important delay tactic. We need to keep physical possession of these firearms so that there's something to roll back should there be another election. Sitting around waiting for total confiscation is not an option. A lot of people love that. And people love to do nothing because it's the easiest thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So if you sit around and do nothing, you're going to get nothing. So I guess we'll see what happens. That's why we rolled out a suggestion of grandfathering, and grandfathering has now been rejected. They want to go forward with their multi-billion-dollar program to take guns from me whilst people get shot in the street with illegal guns.
To that point, so they've officially rejected your offer of grandfathering?
Well, we got notification from the Prime Minister's office. We read your document very carefully. I'm sure they
did.
read it
Yeah.
very carefully. It was a 6-page document, so I don't know how much effort that would require. They forwarded it to the Minister of Public Safety, which we had sent it to anyway. We sent it to every liberal MP. We sent it to every Liberal staffer that we had information for, of course, the Prime Minister and all the cabinet ministers that mattered. But they know how to do this. They've done grandfathering before. So for them to turn, so in a way, it's good and bad, right? For them to turn away from that shows they only want to take firearms from licensed gun owners. They are not concerned about criminals that are shooting houses and drive-by shootings and all the rest of this and kicking doors in. They're not concerned about that. Only licensed gun owners. So I don't want to fall down the rabbit hole, but think about that for a second.
Mm-hmm.
They're willing to spend billions of dollars in deficit spending. They're willing to make people like me absolutely furious, like turn their lives upside down. And when they have a viable alternative, but no, they're going to go forward with it. So there's a lot going on with this, and I don't want to get too inflammatory about it, but I think people should just think about that and see where this government is going.
We are going to be speaking with a spokesperson for the Toronto Police Association, who I will point out as a group are being brave by speaking up about this. Usually police are hesitant to wade into things like this. They're pretty stoic in my experience, but they're actually speaking up. Basically to summarize what they're saying is, hey, it's not the sport shooters and the hunters and the law-abiding firearms owners that we're having trouble with here on the streets of Toronto. It's the gangbangers with the illegal guns, which are often smuggled across the border. I know that is no surprise to any rational person who's listening right now, but it's really important, I think, to have a respected law enforcement organization like the Toronto Police Association speak up on an issue like this. Are you hearing from other police officer groups saying, hey, yeah, we have a gun problem in Canada, but it's not with the duck hunters?
Yeah, of course. I mean, even the National Police Federation had put out a statement. That's the union that represents all of the frontline police officers of the RCMP, which is I think one of the biggest police agencies on the planet because of the national force, obviously, right? But even there, these are frontline people. These are the people that have to deal with people wielding firearms in a criminal manner. And even they are like, just leave the licensed gun owners alone. But the government isn't listening to police. They only listen to police when the police are saying something that works for them. When the police are saying something that goes against their politics or their ideological pursuits, then it's like, well, we don't listen to police. So, good for Toronto Police for standing up, good for the National Police Federation and the countless other police forces. Although there are some that have signed agreements with the federal government for money, for funding to roll out this confiscation program. Winnipeg Police being one of them, and I think there's one in Eastern Canada as well. I think the OPP are looking at it too. I guess we'll see, but you got to wonder what's going on with these police forces that are signing on to this. It's pretty monstrous.
It's for the record, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has instructed, saying her province isn't going to be putting taxpayers' money into this.
That's
So
great.
that was nice to hear.
Yeah.
Rod, that's all the time we have. Where can people find your work if they want to tune into your show, if they want to jump on board the advocacy train, if they want to speak up for law-abiding firearms owners? Because you may not own a firearm today, it may not affect you today, but it could be your gas-powered car next week, okay, if we let this go through. Rod, where can people find your work?
Well, of course, they can go to ccfr.ca. You can also see our podcast, the CCFR Radio podcast, on YouTube and all the other social media platforms. We also have a nationally broadcast television show on Wild TV going into our 5th season called CCFR Radio on the Air. So you can find us through all that and the socials.
Rod, thank you so much for joining us today.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Kris.
Good luck. Once again, that is Rod Giltaca. He is with the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights, the CCFR. You've probably seen their big logos. It's kind of like half of a maple leaf and half of a long gun on the other side. Again, they are an advocacy organization that are fighting for the rights of legal, law-abiding firearms owners. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation, we are also in this fight from, of course, the financial angle, because as he pointed out with the debt, we do not have the money to spend on things like this, okay? We cannot afford to be paying for a huge amount of compensation for the confiscation of firearms, and we also can't be affording how much it is going to cost. Just imagine how much this is going to cost police to do this. Imagine them having to go door to door, all of these man hours, door to door, to legal, law-abiding firearms owners, saying, knock, knock, who's there? The police, we're here to confiscate your property. Or even if people are safely coming up to the police station saying, here, I'm here to, allow the state to take away my property. I've got it in the car. You have no idea how many hours and hours and hours of police time that accrues. Now multiply that by however many thousands and thousands and thousands of people are going to be stuck in that situation, and we have money. To exactly what Rod was talking about, okay? This is not trying to combat the actual street level gang crime that people are seeing with handguns, which are illegally brought over, often from across the border in the United States. We hear time and time again from police organizations saying, yeah, we have a gun problem, but we don't have a gun problem with the normal law-abiding firearms owners who are out there as sport shooters and hunters. How much of a problem is this? Who is speaking up on this on behalf of the police? Let's find out. Joining me now is Clayton Campbell. He is the president of the Toronto Police Association. Basically, what that is the union representing the frontline guys and gals in blue on the streets of Toronto who work as police officers. So, sir, Mr. Campbell, thank you so much for joining the show today. I know it really matters when associations like yours speak up on this stuff.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and it's great to speak to an audience outside of Ontario. So thanks for the invitation.
We really appreciate it. Now, the reason why we invited you on the show is because I saw your statement posted on X, and we can probably pull it up here just to kind of summarize. You're basically saying here, if I put on my glasses, in the city of Toronto, which is the focal point for a lot of the conversation around gun violence, it will have little to zero impact on firearm crime we're seeing in the city. It is a small number of gangs or organized crime members involved in firearm violence in the city, and it is not legal gun owners. Now, of course, you're referencing there the so-called buyback program that is being rolled out by the federal government. As a law-abiding firearms owner, I would describe it more as a confiscation rollout, but for argument's sake, let's call it the buyback. Why did you feel it was important to speak up against this form of the buyback?
Yeah, I mean, since I've taken this role, and you mentioned, I'm so fortunate I get to represent about 8,600 members. They're police officers, special constables, dispatchers, our IT people, all across the great men and women that keep Toronto safe each and every day. And the firearm issue in the city of Toronto is really the focal point when it comes across all of Canada. And so it's important to talk about the things that actually work and the things that don't work. And what we find in the city of Toronto is that last year, our great men and women seized about 700 illegal guns in the city. About 90% of those were sourced to the United States illegally from the United States. The other 10% were probably from the US, but very difficult to source everything if you're a gun owner, serial number scratched off, things of that sort. So what we found, it is not legal gun owners. It's certainly not hunters or target shooters. They're involved in crimes in the city of Toronto. It's a small number of thugs, criminal gangs, organized crime that are involved in terrorizing our great city. And really, we thought that that's a waste of resources to spend that amount of money on this gun buyback program. And we can think of many ways it could be spent that would actually keep the city of Toronto safe.
You know, as a firearms owner, and I've got law enforcement in my family, I'm just trying to picture what that would look like. Trying to get Toronto police or any other police team trying to confiscate the otherwise legal property of law-abiding gun owners. Just, you know, the man hours or the people hours involved in this of, you know, would you have to go door to door?
It'd be tough, right? I mean, these are a lot of the times they're unrestricted firearms, so we don't know where they are, and really just a waste of resources, in my opinion. In the city of Toronto, we've seen luckily an increase of investment in public safety. We've seen the city of Toronto and our police services board, that's the employer for all of our members, start to reinvest in the city of Toronto and in public safety after many years of defunding the police. So we're starting to head in the right direction, but we're not there yet. We still take a long time to get the radio calls. We're still short-staffed in many areas of the service. So it would really be a ridiculous use of resources. And what we really need to focus on in the city, and I think the federal government does, is on the legal use of firearms by bad guys, not law-abiding citizens. And I think a lot of the time it's just a lack of understanding from people that maybe don't possess firearms. They hear something like, we're going to ban guns, and someone that doesn't have any interaction with guns would think, okay, then just no one's going to have guns and no one's going to get shot. The reality of it is only the bad guys don't follow the rules. And what you're going to be doing is really punishing law-abiding citizens instead of focusing on the bad guys that are causing the violence in our city.
Yeah, it's not typically the criminals who are getting the government bat signal saying, oh, what I'm doing is illegal. Let me go turn in my illegal guns anyway.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like they're already in possession of an illegal gun. I can't think of a time when a legal gun in the city has been used in a crime. I can't think of one. We have hundreds of shootings in this city. We're a large city. We just had an 8-year-old. It was just a horrible story. Shot and killed while he was sleeping in his bed. 8 years old. So sad. And I know when our investigators identify and arrest who was involved in that, this is not some legal gun owner. It certainly isn't somebody target practicing at 1 o'clock in the morning in a park. These are going to be thugs. These are going to be gang members involved in illegal use of firearms, not legal firearm owners.
That was just a terrible story. It's just like your worst nightmare as a parent, right? You put your child to bed. It's hard to even really articulate. To your point, I'm just going to go out on a limb here. You mentioned the person likely responsible. It's also likely that they're already known to police, right? It's also likely that that person already has a rap sheet. And frankly, you know, as a taxpayer, a lot of people forget we already have a lot of these resources there. Like the laws are supposed to be on the books. The bad guys are supposed to stay away from the good guys. Can you expand on that a little bit? Like what would actually help the frontline police keep people more safe in places like Toronto and not have something like this cumbersome government heavy buyback program against law abiding normal firearms owners? What tools do you guys need?
You know, it's pretty basic stuff. It is, we need changes to the criminal code to keep repeat violent offenders in custody. And we're not talking about people involved in a theft or people involved in making a mistake as a youth or something like that. We're talking about gang members involved in violent carjackings, firearm offenses, home invasions, murders, shootings. They need to be kept in custody and they need to be punished. They need to be kept in jail. And one thing I've said many times to the media is that I can guarantee you one thing. If that gang member involved in that illegal firearm offense was in custody, they wouldn't have shot that second person. And I think we need to really put victims first. We need to focus on those bad guys. And there needs to be some minor changes, really small changes to the criminal code to keep them in custody. We lobbied for. I've been at the police union for 7 years. We lobbied the previous Liberal government every single year, and all we saw was changes that actually made it harder to keep bad guys in custody. An election's been held. We have a different, could be a different Liberal government, so we're going to see what they do as far as bail. But we need some minor changes to the criminal code. We're very lucky in Ontario. We have a super supportive provincial government, a conservative government led by Premier Doug Ford, who is very supportive of public safety and our members. And we're hoping in the fall we'll see some changes to the criminal code to keep these thugs in jail.
I have to stress, as a spokesperson for the Taxpayers Federation, I need to repeat, all of this money is being spent anyway. Like the police are being paid, the prisons are being run. All of this stuff is already on the books. It's all at taxpayers' expense. But the cost of the time of the rotating in and out and in and out and in and out, and having these same group of people, in some cases, just a small handful of people causing thousands of crimes over and over again, is a huge strain on the public purse. And this whole buyback program thing, we've had experts speaking from even universities guesstimating that this is going to cost more than $1 billion with a B. And again,
Yeah.
to your point, you're going to have police officers being tasked, maybe going door to door. And I just have this picture in my head, even if they don't have to go door to door, say you have a law-abiding firearms owner show up at the police station, walk into the foyer saying, hey guys, I have something in my trunk. Like the amount of paperwork that would incur, correct?
Yeah, and I mean, we support, and you look in City of Toronto, our mayor is from the NDP party. We have a federal Liberal party. We have a conservative provincial party. We work with anybody, but
Sure.
we base our arguments on truth and evidence, and we know that the gun buyback program is going to have essentially zero impact on the crime in Toronto. There's lots of better ways that we can invest taxpayers' money. Clearly, there's a problem at the border when we're seeing 90% of the illegal firearms seized sourced to the U.S. Clearly, a problem there, and we can definitely use the resources to hunt down these criminals, check on those that are in bail. And like you mentioned, it's a revolving door in and out of custody. It's the same individuals, and it's very expensive to continue to arrest them. The legal cost behind it, the court cost behind it. It's simple. If you shoot an illegal firearm in the streets of Toronto, just put them in jail. We don't need that in the city of Toronto, and just leave the legal gun owners alone and put the bad guys in jail. That's really our message. Yeah.
Lastly, and I don't want you to have to get too political on this or speculate, but we have heard Prime Minister Mark Carney, in his own words, describe himself as a pragmatist. As a longtime political analyst, I've been in the game for a long time. It's frankly easy for the new person to say, you know what? That was the previous guy's plan. That was the previous government. I'm coming in fresh. I'm the pragmatist. I'm going to drop this, this, and this. Are you hopeful that this could be dropped, that they could start focusing more on keeping bad guys in jail, on strengthening the border, reducing the amount of illegal guns coming across the border and flooding places like Toronto? Are you hopeful?
Well, we try, right? We took an unprecedented step. We did support the federal Conservatives in the last election. It was purely around their public safety platform. They've been talking about bail reform for a long time, and we were very supportive of it. I'll say we at least heard in the throne speech conversation around bail. So my job is to advocate on behalf of the members that I represent, and also really the citizens of Toronto, to make sure they're safe. So we're speaking with Conservative MPs and Liberal MPs right now. We had a meeting yesterday with a Conservative MP talking about some changes to the criminal code. We're going to be meeting with Sean Fraser, the Minister of Justice. So we have to continue to advocate, whoever is in power, to try and bring forward some reforms that are going to keep the citizens safe. And a gun buyback program isn't going to do that. And we can, like I said, think of many areas that we'd rather redirect those funds to actually keep the citizens of Toronto safe.
I know we're out of time, and I know that many of our viewers are really happy to hear what you're saying here. Is there any way for them to support what you're saying, or to spread that message to make sure that their elected officials hear what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, we live in a democracy, right? So we can hold politicians accountable, let them know um, really what they're believing in. And I think one of the challenges is a lack of understanding from people that are not involved in firearms, not involved in law enforcement. And when they hear, like I mentioned earlier, we're just going to ban guns, they think, okay, then we're going to have no guns. It's really the reality of it is that it's the criminals that are already in possession of illegal guns when they don't have a license. So I think it's really important to educate everybody. Look, most people living in an urban environment in the city of Toronto have never shot a gun or been a hunter or a target shot. So we can't really blame them for not understanding. So I think there needs to be an education piece. And that's what I'm trying to do, based on evidence and things that are actually going to work, and listening to the over 8,000 members that are out there every day keeping the citizens of Toronto safe.
Clayton Campbell, president of the Toronto Police Association, representing the frontline police officers and peace officers there in Toronto. Thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. Thanks again for having me.
You bet. Once again, you just heard it from him. That was a really important interview. So I have some homework for folks. Can you please share this story? Share this video. It's not often, okay, speaking from experience as a longtime court reporter, it's not often that you hear representatives of the police speak up on something like this, because they're just there to do their job. They're there to follow their orders. They're there to enforce the law. It takes a lot for them to say, you know what? This is really not working here, folks. We need to make some changes here. And you just heard directly from a spokesperson who represents, a huge number of police officers on the streets of Canada's biggest city, that we do have a gun problem in Canada, but it is illegal guns coming from the United States. And that if we're going to spend taxpayers' money fixing what is actually the gun problem, it shouldn't be going after confiscating normal law-abiding firearms owners' property. We should direct those resources into actual street-level crime prevention and thickening that border to make sure that guns like these are not coming into the country in the first place. So it's really important for you right now to head over to Juno News, become a subscriber if you're not one already, and most importantly, share this story. Send this video to your MP, to your MLA, to your family and friends. Make sure they know that the police themselves are saying this current gun confiscation thing is not going to work. Thank you so much for watching.